In this particular elections we are heading to, if the vice president emerges the winner, that tribal card or ethnic card cannot be played. If you want to stay relevant in NPP today, you have to be a supporter of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Every single political statement has an implication, either today or tomorrow.
How do you see people like Alan, people like Kennedy Ajapon, who is also one of the very strong candidates?
To break that perception that the NPP is anti-Northerners and anti-Muslims.
In the unlikelihood event that Dr. Bawumia doesn't win the primaries,
that would most likely collapse the NPP. Aside the tribal line, the tribal politics we play here, we do a lot of religious politics as well.
That's true.
I'm going to predict
if
Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia wins this primaries, he's most likely to pick. I believe that President Mahama doesn't really need to campaign much. He just needs to identify the loopholes in the MPPs. He really hasn't lived up to the expectations of most Ghanaians. When you make a lot of promises and you are given the opportunity, people would want you to fulfill those promises. He said a lot of things that, today, either the opposite is happening or what he was teasing the then government.
Worst of that is happening.
And so that 8th thing is really, really going to be difficult unless...
So I'm super excited to welcome you again to the North Podcast. My name is Prince Hamdan, and as usual, we have conversations that are of interest to the North. And today is no exception. We have a very important conversation that as young people, I think we should have. And it's going to be a political conversation, but we are not being political. I don't know if you understand what I'm trying to say. And I think as young people, we need to have a lot of interest in politics because that's what shapes our future in this country. So I'm fortunate to have one of the finest journalists, you can find in the northern part of Ghana. My brother Yunus is in the studio today to help us have this conversation. And I also have Snapped, my regular suspect, in the studio. Gentlemen, thanks for coming to the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Today I want us to have this conversation of the MPP primaries with regards to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, His Excellency, the Vice President, being one of the candidates who is bidding to lead the MPP into the 2024 election. We might be having a more, the conversation might be gravitating more towards His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia because of the fact that this podcast is the North Podcast. And he being, a Northerner, basically that is the only reason why the conversation is gravitating towards him. So anybody listening, it's not as though there is a special agenda or a special interest anywhere. The only interest is that what the conversations we have here are almost always of interest to the North. So basically, that's why we are having this conversation. You had the opportunity to interview His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. How was that experience? And that I told you he's one of the finest journalists. So we are starting.
You caught me off guard. It was a wonderful experience. The first time, interviewing such a high-profile personality.
The first gentleman of the land.
Even though we have had the opportunity to interact with them one-on-one. It was the first time you were on set with him, posing questions to him.
Direct questions
to him. I think it was a wonderful experience, and I'm praying that every young journalist gets that opportunity to interview the president. Look, the president is a very jovial person. Before we even got on set, on air, he cracked one or two jokes.
Oh, really?
I mean, obviously, he may have realized that I was a bit tensed. Wow. So he needed
and that is very, normal.
So that actually boosted your confidence a bit.
It did. Yes. It did. Yes. I mean, when you're going to interview someone and you realize the person is,
it's natural.
Yeah. Coming down to your level,
you're able to relate.
You are able to relate.
You are more free.
After the interview again, I had a conversation with him again, and it was a wonderful experience. Sometimes when you see them on TV, when you see them from afar, you think they will be very difficult people. Aside their handlers, really, they are very cool people around.
Wow. Okay, so let's get. Did you also interview
somebody? Who dare me?
How dare you?
How dare me?
Okay, so let's get into the meat of the conversation. What do you think, or what do you make of His Excellency Dr. Bawomia's bid to lead the MPP as their flag bearer in leading to the 2024 elections?
I think it's going to be a defining moment for our democracy. A defining moment because if he emerges as a winner of that contest, that primaries, he's going to be contesting John Dramani Mahama.
And they are the two front
and I think we even get into
runners, and they are both from the north. It is going to be the first time in our country's history that the front runners are from here. So it's going to redefine our democracy. We've had conversations around how we vote based on ethnic and tribal lines. In this particular elections we are heading to, if the vice president emerges the winner, that tribal card or ethnic card cannot be played. It will be about who is able to convince Ghanaians to vote for them. To be about the person's track record. It's going to be about the person's competence and not necessarily where the person is coming from. So I think that's why I think it will be a redefining moment for our democracy.
Right. What do you think?
I don't know. This is more of a question. Do you think that when it happens that way, the other people from the other ethnic groups would relax in voting, or since they don't have somebody representing them?
Would they be voter apathy?
Or the voting strength would switch from those two big parties to other parties that have runners.
But why do you think there will be that switch in votes?
I'm just thinking because he mentioned that because of that ethnicity,
whether it might affect.
Affect.
I mean, generally, I think that the 2024 elections would be an election where there will be a lot of apathy. I mean, we the youth generally are getting fed up with politicians.
That's true.
Because of their consistent promise and fail. Not just from one political party, but from all the political parties, from all politicians. And so people are getting fed up with elections. I'm sure it's going to lead to a lot of people not coming out to vote. But to your question, it will. I think it will. It will play a role. There are people, excuse my language, who are tribal bigots.
Definitely.
Yes, and if they realize that, especially in this primaries they are going, if it gets bitter, which I know it would, people who were going to be supporting a different presidential aspirant because of where he or she is coming from, would likely not come out and vote.
Because the other person is...
Because the other person is not coming from where he or she is coming from. So I think it will play a role. But it would not be as significant as the earlier one I said, where people are generally fed up.
So if there will be a reduction in the numbers, it would not be mainly because of...
Exactly. It will not be because... so-called Southerners are not the front runners.
Right.
Yeah.
But the president seems to betraying his weight behind Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. I don't know how factual that is, but that is what it comes across to be. Is that going to give him an advantage over the other candidates?
Indeed. He has incumbency advantage, right? He has state resources at his disposal. The other aspirants, all of them, apart from those who are MPs, had to resign from their positions in government to be able to contest. It's only the vice president who is still holding on to the position, and that's because it is an elected position, right? So he has that advantage where the state resources are at his disposal. I mean, the president knows that he's not going again, and so he's a bit relaxed. The president knows that, especially in the case of Dr. Bawumia, whether you like it or not, he was the one who projected NPP, who sold NPP's ideas to Ghanaians in a run-up to the 2016 elections. So the president would feel he's somewhat indebted to Dr. Bawumia and would naturally, support him. If he doesn't support him, it means that he's not supporting his own legacy. Because Bawumia is the legacy of akufo-addo. And so if he doesn't support him, he would have been denting the legacy,
his own self.
Of his own self. And so it is natural. And it is going to really give Dr. Bawumia an advantage. For instance, we are hearing that there are some parliamentary aspirants who are now coiling back because of Dr. Bawumia's intervention. I'm sure Napatia was looking at contesting Nantong. What we are hearing now is that she's moving to Tamale North, and that's because of the intervention of the vice president. And it is obviously because she believes that if the vice president wins, which is most likely, she would need his support to stay in government, right? Otherwise, if she refuses to listen to the vice president and he goes ahead to win the elections, she may not have a place in his government.
Right.
And so I think that, and it is not her alone. A lot of the aspirants we are hearing, they are repositioning them, switching them to different constituencies, and it's all in a bid to ensure the party's unity and also to make it easier for them to win. And so I think that is giving him an advantage. He has the advantage of at least 10 regional chairpersons of the party.
And MPs.
And MPs.
Several of them.
More than majority of the majority MPs in parliament. He has their support. And that is really because, he has all the state resources. Look, even Alan Chirmantin's camp has consistently complained that they are gagging people. They are forcing people to support Dr. Bawumia. And those who have refused to support them have been victimized and are losing their jobs in government. Even Kennedy Ajapon mentioned that they were denying him certain contracts just because of his intention to contest, the vice president. So I think he's definitely going to get that advantage. We are hoping that advantage doesn't become a disadvantage again to him, because if the other candidates are able to, drum home that victimization card, it is most likely to affect him.
Sympathy.
Exactly.
But what do you think of the people who also think that supporting Bawumia against Alan could be, betrayal to Alan, because a lot of people feel that Alan is the next in line, as they usually put it, because it's as though it's a queue where people are coming one after the other, and
because
all of a sudden
he has been
going contesting
for like
for
2 different terms,
more than two.
More than two.
Right. This is about his third time.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we hear that conversation a lot, especially in the NPP. But really, if you look at what Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has done since stepping in as a running mate to the presidential candidate of the NPP, it's been massive. After the 2012 elections, he came in 2008. Unfortunately, they didn't win the elections and after that, in 2007, when they went for their primaries and Alan lost, he quelled back. There were reports that he was even retiring from active politics, and so between 2008 and 2016, Alan was virtually missing in the political limelight. It was Dr. Bawumia who was doing everything. For instance, when the party went into the 2012 elections and lost, and they had to go to the Supreme Court, it was Dr. Bawumia was saying. After 2012, the election petition, the one single person who gave the NDC the toughest time was Dr. Bawumia. From organizing lecture series to, court cases, a whole lot. He was doing virtually everything. Even President Akufo-Addo wasn't that active. It was always Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. And so when I hear someone say that it is Alan's time, probably in the queue, but when it comes to who has done a lot of work, you cannot take that away from Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. And Alan, his name went missing, really. A lot of young people forgot about him.
Cash man.
Yes. Those of us who were a bit grown in 2008, prior to 2008, we knew Alan. But first-timers, especially those first-timers who voted in 2016, most of them didn't know Alan because he wasn't really active again in politics.
Yeah.
And so if Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia was the one who brought virtually NPP into power, then I think that as an outsider who doesn't have a single vote in the NPP's primaries, he's the most likely person NPP delegates would trust to be able to break the 8 for them. Because if you take off Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and you bring on Alan or Kennedy Agyapong or Boakye Agyako or any of the 10 aspirants, they are 10. The person will be a new face. So the party would have to spend a lot...
Do more work.
And do a lot of work again to be able to brand that person.
Yeah.
Right. And especially at a time where people are already getting fed up with politics, it will cost the party a lot. A lot. So I'm sure the party's delegates will consider all these things and say that, look, this man was there when we needed him. He has been the face of the party for well over 12 years.
Gone into the gutters and
exactly.
taking the debts.
He's one of the most vilified persons in Ghana today. Right? So, if we take him out and bring someone new, whereas the NDC is bringing back an old face, it would dent our chances of winning, 2024.
Those
and I'm speaking,
delegates.
Yeah, the thoughts of delegates, And so I'm sure that's what they will consider, and they will most likely vote for.
Let me ask. I don't know whether you have something.
Speaking in our own thoughts, do you think that what they are doing with reshuffling, especially with Napaga TS case, when you mentioned it, I was a bit worried about, because she's from Nantong.
Yeah.
She's a royal there, I understand. Switching to Tamale North, what do you think that would do to them?
I'm sure
knowing that they would want to win the seat, and then whoever is running Tamale North when it comes to the general election would be a tough person.
Yeah.
For Napaga TS titles. I don't know if that makes sense.
Definitely. I'm sure one of the reasons why they are doing those things is to, one, protect incumbent MPs.
Okay.
So that they are able to spend their resources on the general elections and not on the party's primaries.
Right.
That's one. Two, they may also be looking at very strong candidates, strong as in people who have resources, to go to opposition strongholds like Tamale North, to be able to spend
or give them a fight.
Exactly.
For their money.
Exactly. So I'm sure these are the considerations. Yes. And the third one would obviously be a party unity, how to maintain the party's front line ahead of the 2024 elections. In Nantong, if you have been monitoring, even though she has not actively activated, her campaigns, there was already a lot of bickering and a whole lot of anger within the party. Their ranks were breaking because the incumbent MP, Honorable Tuferi, is also a very strong, person there. Just like Napa, he's also a royal of a sort from that constituency, and so
makes sense.
Yes, it was really going to divide the party if they allowed her to go. Yes.
His Excellency Alhaji Aliyu Mahama, may his soul rest in peace. May Allah, forgive him of his shortcomings. Was tipped to win the primaries in 2007 when he was contesting alongside, I think, 19 others or so. And because of the fact that the other MPP traditions, as we know them, had already, led the party in one way or the other, feeling that the other tradition, which is the Dombo tradition, was the only tradition left to lead the party, to make it more equal. Do you think events from the past are going to give Dr. Bawumia an edge when it comes to the primaries?
Yes, it will. Even though I think that he himself has already built some kind of credibility for himself. I think the experience the NPP had after our late father could not win their primaries is going to be at the back of their minds, and they wouldn't want to repeat that, because we all know what happened. The opposition used it as a campaign against them, that they were anti-Northerners, they were anti-Muslims, a whole lot of, propaganda against that. And so that has given Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia some kind of edge. And I believe that it is one of the reasons why the president really would want to support his vice president to go through. Right. Because if you remember correctly, President Kufuor didn't really support
His Excellency,
our late father, Alhaji Aliyu Mahama. His candidates, even though it wasn't in the open like that, was Alan Cash, right? And President akufo-addo emerged from nowhere and won. And President akufo-addo won that primaries because he had also built that kind of credibility and that kind of solid base Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has built now for himself. Yeah. And because he was always at the forefront of protests, he he was always giving the opposition, I mean,
tough times, the person to fear
tough times.
from
Even when the party was in opposition, everyone feared Rawlings.
yeah,
but
but
Akufo-Addo
was that person that was not.
was that person who didn't really fear him. He was organizing demonstrations. He was all over the media. At that time, the local media wasn't that vibrant like that. So he was using the international media, like the BBCs, to really give governments a tough time. And so he built that base. There were people who were not even NPP people, but had said that if he wins the primaries, they were going to vote for him. And he indeed won. And that's why, even though for the first 2 terms he didn't really make an impact, but in 2016, it was massive for him. I think that is going to play to the advantage of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. And again, in that contest, there were 17, right? 17 aspirants. Strong aspirants. Because you even had the president's brother in that contest.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes. Addo Kufuor, right? Yeah. He was contesting. Alan was there. Almighty Akufo-Addo was there. And there are many more.
And many more.
Yes. So it was always going to be difficult for our father to win. And the difference between then and now is that Alhaji Aliyu Mahama didn't really have the support of the North. I mean, even in his home region, Northern region, he didn't win at the primaries.
But would that be that, at the time, they didn't have so many MPs from...
At the time, they didn't have... Well, one reason that really affected Alhaji Aliyu Mahama was that unfortunate incident of END in 2002. Yeah. It affected his political career. He didn't know how to detach himself from the allegations they leveled against him. And I mean, at that time, social media wasn't that strong. And so his party, his supporters couldn't also wage that campaign
defense.
And that defense. And so that affected him. Dr. Bawumia is lucky, even though he also has the Boku issue to also deal with. But he's lucky. The Boku issue is not really that
directly connected
like that. Yes, it's about what he could have done and he hasn't been able to do. Yeah, so that's the difference. And the last thing is, at that time, we didn't really have strong Northerners in the national political limelight. Like now we have the Aminantes, we have the Farouk Aliyu Mahamas. If you go to the Upper West, Upper East region, we have the Anthony Cabos and co. These are people who are pillars in the NPP now. But cast your mind back to Aliyu Mahama's era. You could mention Mustafa Ali, all right? But apart from him, who else? You see?
Point.
Yeah. So that really affected his chances. So I think Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia has a greater chance to do better than what Aliyu Mahama did.
But one other thing is that the other candidates are no mere, rights for when it comes to the primaries. How do you see people like Alan, people like Kennedy Ajapon, who is also one of the very strong candidates?
Yeah.
How do you see them performing in comparison with Dr. Bawumia?
I am thinking that Dr. Bawumia will not get less than 60% of
the votes.
Wow, not less than.
Yeah. Because one, he has the incumbency advantage. Two, all the major stakeholders in the party support him. Three, he has 99% support from his home region. His home region is Northeast, right?
Mm.
In the northern region, it's almost like 100% for him. Across northern Ghana, really, he has over 90%, chances of winning. In the Ashanti region, where a lot of the candidates are coming from, he still has good and strong, numbers there. If you have someone like Jamawun to me supporting you, it means that you have a solid foundation.
Even in the Ashanti region.
Even in the Ashanti region.
And, I don't know where Samir Uku is from, but I saw that he went to pick up his nomination.
Yes.
For him.
Yes.
So I think it just
so in the Akan areas, he has a lot of support.
Yeah.
He has.
Yeah.
And one thing that's going to affect the others is the fact that almost all of them are from Akan areas, right? It's only Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia who's not coming from there. And even with that, he's still a very strong candidate in their strongholds.
So he's going to share their numbers with them.
He's going to share their numbers
and come
with
home
them
and get home support.
Come home and get home support. Then swing regions like Central Region and Bono, Ahafo region, or the three Ahafo regions now. These are the swing areas. If he's able to get at least 40% of the votes from each of these these regions, he's going to win.
Yeah. The majority of the party people are supporting Bawumia, but is it just because there is that pressure to support the incumbency or to support his legacy as the president, or is because of the competence of His Excellency the Vice President?
I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. One, to break that perception that the NPP is anti-Northerners and anti-Muslims. I think that's the biggest on the agendas for them. They would really want to break that. Because if you look at the 2020 elections, the NPP made a lot of gains in the northern constituencies.
Yeah.
And that was because of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. So the party believes that if they are able to break that perception that
bring them a lot
they
of
are
gains,
anti-Northerners, they may likely sweep a lot of in their thoughts. They may likely sweep a lot of constituencies and votes in the north. Another factor obviously is the incumbency. If you want to stay relevant in NPP today, you have to be a supporter of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Otherwise, you'll not get the contracts. I'm even told,
so the pressure is also
even in the northern region, this recent Hajj, activities that were happening. I'm told if you were not a supporter of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, people have made those allegations on radio, on television, and they are mostly NPP people, that if you are not a supporter of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, you cannot even get the Kaya job at the airport. So that's how they have decentralized the support for Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, and the fact that the incumbency is working for him. So that will really play to his advantage.
But do you think there will be a last minute switch? Can there be that, like, where,
or not even a last minute switch, but then people saying it but not going to do what they say?
That's where the last minute switch is.
That is the fear.
But it's not going to be last minute, because everybody has their minds made up. It's just that they don't want to be victimized.
Yeah.
So they will say it, but in their hearts they know what they are going to do.
And last minute they'll do it. That's where I'm coming
from. The vote is always at the last minute.
They may not come out openly and declare their support, but when they go to the polls, they will most likely vote. And a lot of people have said that is likely to happen. And I also believe that because you
happen.
cannot really trust
follow somebody to
delegates.
Because I'm thinking, would
Fear
Bawumia still
delegates.
would Dr. Bawumia still hold his position as the vice president if he wins the primaries?
Yes, if he wins, it will just be a couple of months to the elections.
Yes.
So he'll still hold the position.
Their primaries is going to be in, I think, November.
Yes, November.
Yes,
Yes.
so November, it will be barely a year to go, and he will be a vice president.
He would still be the vice president.
The constitution
Yes.
Doesn't have any issue with that, and that's why even the president can go and contest and still be the president and be the flag bearer of his political party.
Makes sense.
What do you say about those who also feel or felt that, I mean, His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia was the leader of the economic management team, and a lot of people have the opinion that they didn't really do that well when it came to managing the economy. What do you think? Let's say you were part of his campaign team. What would have been the message?
First of all, I think I would
And
have
wouldn't
come
that
to
also
his
affect
lowest. We are talking about his highest now.
Yes.
His lowest is that he really hasn't lived up to the expectations of most Ghanaians. And, people expect more from you when you talk more, right? When you make a lot of promises and you are given the opportunity, people would want you to fulfill those promises. I spoke about when he used to organize seminars, lecture series, and all those things just to shake the then government. His strongest was the economy, right? But when he came into power, I think the first 6 months, he was still talking economics. But afterwards,
we didn't hear much.
We didn't hear much from him, especially when our economy started to crumble. We didn't really hear much from him. He moved to a different sector. And that was what?
More IT.
Yeah, more IT.
Digitalization.
Than economics.
But I don't know. Okay, you finish.
And that really has affected him, his image, whether you like it. And I know his PR outfit knows about this and are likely trying to rebrand him. He said a lot of things that, today, either the opposite is happening or what he was teasing the then government.
Worst of that is happening. And today, when you switch on your radio sets or your television sets, you are most likely to hear an audio or see a video of some of the things
he said
that
he was going to do either worse or his government hasn't been able to do. And so that is his lowest. And I don't know if they still have that time to be able to convince the party's delegates. I think they still have time when it comes to the national elections. But as to whether they have enough time to be able to rebrand him ahead of the party's primaries is another thing.
In-house, I think within the party, they know, or I don't think that would be a problem for him, because from my point of view, or what I hear from what people say, he was only put in front to make those promises. But when it comes to managing it, he is not really the person doing it, because he's known to be the head of the economic team. But let's be honest. When there's those monies going here and things not happening, we know who exactly comes out to defend, or who takes the money and who says what they have done with the money and all of that. I don't think it's Bawumia's fault. Within the party, they would know that.
You know why that EMT thing is still hanging on him? That's his famous or infamous speech, depending on where you are standing, where he was mentioning their EMT members and their credentials,
how solid the team was.
How solid the team was, and making fun of the NDC's EMT, and even asking if we knew even a single one of them. You know, that particular statement or speech is the reason why that EMT thing is still hanging on him. Look, every vice president is usually the head of the economic management team, but
he was more.
We have never really gone into an election where a vice president is contesting either at the primaries or general elections, and people are questioning his ability to manage the economy. Yeah. You know, it was Dr. Bawumia who said he had what it takes to manage it, to do it. And unfortunately, when he came, we didn't see it. Talk about the mafia tactics and all those things happening. Yes, it happens. And that's why I blame his handlers. Look, Dr. Bawumia was still very green in politics when he became the vice president. You know, he was barely 8 years in politics. He's a technocrat, you know, a solid one at that. But he was new to politics. So those days in opposition, his handlers could have done better. As to whether he was surrounded by people who were waging certain campaigns against him inwardly or not, we will not be able to tell. Right. I think that they didn't do well. At the time he was making all those promises, every single promise of the NPP was first, you know,
heard from him.
This one village, one dam thing. I remember when Savlugu covering his campaign activities at the Savlugu Central Lorry Station. That's where the idea came up, and he said it and explained it. Unfortunately, the media took it up. You know, and it became a major campaign promise of the NPP. Some of the things he said, I don't know if they were really things the NPP had already planned to do, or they were just, you know,
saying
things
it out
he
of
said,
excitement.
and because of the good reception Ghanaians gave it, they made it major things. Otherwise, I think his handlers could have done better then. They failed him. They did. And I don't know who they are really, but I think whoever was around him then failed him. Didn't do enough to protect him. You know, political scientists, political actors are able to read into the future. Every single political statement has an implication either today or tomorrow. And so if he had such people, political scientists and others around him, they should have been listening to his speeches. I mean, I'm even sure for most of them, he had someone to write it. Even though they would have been his ideas anyways, he would still have someone to write it. They have speech writers, right? And so at that time, they should have been carefully editing, you know, his statements. Sometimes a single word can change everything.
The meaning of the entire, you know.
But I think they didn't do enough, and that is the reason why there's that backlash on him. And he's the head. The ultimate responsibility lies on him. So whether there are people behind doing one thing or the other, what we are seeing on our screens, what we are seeing as
what we are hearing, and from whom we are hearing it from, is the one we hold responsible.
And we see him as the head. We see him as someone who said he'll do A, B, and C and hasn't been able to do them. And so he's the one we'll blame.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is very important in our local politics is personality and charisma. And I see a lot of people giving applause to His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia when it comes to his personality and his charisma. You know, the things he do, how he does his things. You know, there were times I saw a picture of him, kneeling to or squatting to greet some of the elders of their party and all of those things. His relationship with lepers and vulnerable people.
Yeah.
Do you think this is also something that is going to win him sympathy, from his people?
Yes, when you are going into every political contest, you consider a lot of things. We have the 69 supporters, right? You turn them this way, they are NPP. Turn them this way, they are NPP. You have people who are opposition elements, so they are also 69. Then we have people who would have supported you if you were living a certain life, right? Then we have the undecided. So whatever you are doing, you should be targeting these people. And I know, for instance, when we are going into elections, you see politicians come and sit around with the youth, play drafts, and do a lot of things. Just so they bring themselves down to their level. They want to be seen as people who are with humility, people who are down to earth and all those things. So they have people they are targeting, really. There are most of our elderly folk, they get carried away
when they see
when they see, especially an old man, living.
Has never seen this person before.
So those things play a role. And again, for those of us who are coming, who have rich cultural, heritage, upbringing, and all those things, when you see someone respect and project your culture, you naturally like the person. Yes. And so when you see him squat, it's a cultural thing, right? See him squat to greet people. My grandmother in the village will say, "Oh wow,
Bingo Terjil.
Bingo Terjil. Only Tangbanzola and them. So those ones are just the political gimmicks,
What are going to be the dynamics in the unlikelihood event that Dr. Bawumia doesn't win the primaries?
I don't foresee that happening anyways. But
in politics, anything can happen.
In politics, anything can happen. But if you have followed Ghanaian politics from at least 96 to date, you know that it is almost a done deal for Dr. If you are going into a contest and you have someone always complaining, you know the person is likely to lose. When you have someone who is always vilified, who his opponents are doing everything to destroy, it means that he's a strong candidate.
But let's just talk about the unlikely event that he doesn't win.
Well, I think if he doesn't win, it would give more weight to the perceptions of people that, one, NPP is anti-Northerners, two, NPP is anti-Muslims. And that would most likely collapse the NPP.
Wow.
Because a lot of young people...
These two issues carry a lot of weight in our politics in Ghana.
Yes, a lot of young people here in the north are saying that if Dr. Bawumia doesn't win, they will quit supporting NPP.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
We interact with them.
Especially with regards to what happened with Alhaji Aliyu Muhammad's case.
Exactly.
This particular one.
And this one happening again, it would be disastrous for the NPP.
Because it would mean that it would take a lot for another person from this side to have that much power to be able to run.
And they have said that they will not settle for second best.
Wow.
No. Wow. Yes, and so
and I think they are right, because
of course, of course,
it's not like for anybody to suggest who is supposed to always be, the leader of the country.
Yeah.
Once you have the credibility to do it, it shouldn't matter, where you come from or who you are.
Yeah. And if you look at all these aspirants, the only person you see very close to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia now is Alan. And Alan, because he has been in the game for a very long time,
Right.
and he also has somewhat a solid base. But like I said earlier, people feel he could have done better to protect his position in the party when the party was in opposition. Unfortunately, to many of the NPP folks, they didn't see him do
Much
that.
of him, yeah.
And so that has really affected him. In the unlikely event that Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia doesn't win, that apathy I spoke of will play. The religious and ethnic thing will play. And the third thing that will play would be, why always a particular group of people? Right. So if it is Kennedy Ajapon, that would be better, because he's coming from the central region.
Yeah.
Right. If it is Joe Gatti, he's coming, I think, from the western region or so. If it is the other candidates from
Where
the
is Ejako
Ashanti
from?
region, who?
Ejako.
Ejako, I think he's from
Is he from somewhere, the eastern region?
no, he's not from the eastern region. He's either from the Ashanti region or central region. Yeah.
And I think there's even going to be a very thin line, because in this country, what we know, the divisions we know, is the south and the north.
And the north.
So
Absolutely.
whether central or there's still going to be that,
Absolutely.
dividing line.
And I feel that the Ashanti region really supports Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia.
And a lot of the people,
They really
coming
support
out,
him.
yeah.
So if he doesn't win, I usually don't want to draw in the tribal thing, but whether you like it or
It's
not,
always there.
It's always there. There's this rift also between the Akans from Ashanti region and the Akans from the eastern region, the Achim. Yes. And so if it happens that another person from Achim land
Takes it.
It's
going to be almost the same, because the other group are also going to.
Yeah. But I think that it is most unlikely to happen. I have a strong belief.
He's going to win.
So let's say he wins. What are going to be the dynamics heading into the 2024 election?
Yes. So I said he'll be the first northerner to lead the NPP. Right. And he's going to be a Muslim. Right. Now, that's where it's going to get interesting. Because the NDC has a candidate who is a northerner, all right, but is a Christian. And aside the tribal line, the tribal politics we play here, we do a lot of religious politics as well.
That's true.
Right. And so the vice president would be disadvantaged of a sort. Because let's take it that there's someone in the south who is an NPP and is a tribal bigot. No matter what he believes or she believes that someone from southern Ghana should lead the NPP and be Ghana's president. Then we have a situation where there are two Northerners contesting. The person has to choose one of them.
So that was where I was about to go to.
The person,
it's going to be a Northern derby.
Yes. The person has to choose one of them. That person is most likely
not to vote.
To vote for someone he or she has a bit of connection with. And that will be what? The religious thing. You see? So John Dramani Mahama, even though it's going to be, it's a Northerner, will most likely be the favorite of most Southerners, especially those who vote purely on tribal or religious
basis.
And look, if you take our election demographics, our election statistics, these things are clear.
And basically, these are not things we are saying. These are analysis.
No.
You get it. So we are not sitting here. Casting tribal or
not at all
religious. This is the reality we see from at least from our point of view. So I just needed to make that clear.
Because of time, I would have taken us back to the era of Hilal Liman and
let's do that.
He was, his government didn't succeed.
Okay.
Hilal Liman was coming from the north, right? And he was a Muslim, correct?
Yeah.
So when he won, in the top military ranks, there was this argument that, look, this man cannot be leading the country because of where he's coming from, because of his religion. So at a point, you had people who were from the north and didn't even support Hilal Liman and didn't vote him in that election, who had to switch after the elections to support him because that kind of agenda was now being pursued against him because he was a Northerner and because he was a Muslim. I'm sure, look, when you read a lot of history books, even Kotoka, who was one of our worst military, head of states, because he overthrew, our man, right? Yes. Even though he was one of the worst, we still project him in our history as a hero. But go and read about Dr. Hilal Liman. Read about things they write about him. And those days, most of the writers were not from here, even till date.
That's one thing I have, a big issue with. We are not really, interested when it comes to writing our stories, writing our history, and all of that. It's as though it's not important.
Imagine Dr. Edu Buahin writing about Dagbon history. That's why we always hear that Dagombes and Ashantis had a war,
which never
happened. But it found its way into our history. When you read about Ghana's history, political history, you see that one person is almost always, relegated to the background, and that person is usually Dr. Hilal Liman. And it is largely just because he wasn't one of them, My old boy told us about how when it was eminent that Dr. Hilal Liman was going to be overthrown, how the northern elites tried to save him because the agenda was so clear. At the point, they were not even hiding it again. And they succeeded in what? Overthrowing him. So it is something that has happened all this while. And when you look at the formation of NPP, the original NPP was what? Northern People's Party.
Yeah.
So why is it now Dankwa Buzia Dombo and not Dombo Dankwa Buzia?
Yeah.
And even Dombo was taken off completely. It was when Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia was brought on that they had to. It was always
mostly the
tradition,
Dombo
right?
is always silent.
Yes, it was always
Dankwa
Buzia tradition. It was not until Dr. Bawumia came and, because the NDC used that anti-Northerners, anti-Muslims thing against them, that's when they now started bringing in Dombo, and it is now Dankwa Buzia Dombo. And again, one of the biggest financiers, biggest spenders of this UP tradition was the Tolana. Right? But how many times do we hear of him?
Wow.
Major?
I'll
Major's
make
father.
All right.
Yes.
Oh, his father instead.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. You don't, even Major himself,
We don't hear much of him.
we don't hear much, right?
I think I would let you take me to Major for a conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So these things are the reasons why political analysts cannot stop, predicting elections and political stuff based on
These things.
tribal lines. And so in 2024, if Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and John Dramani Mahama are contesting, and we don't have a third strong force, most people from that part of the country would really be confused. Even if they were MPP, they'll be confused.
Yeah.
Imagine former President Mahama worships with Assemblies of God, right? Assemblies of God Church. And they have their branches all over the country. One of the biggest church in the country. I mean, it's the Assemblies of God Church. So, and you know why the Gum man made such significant inroads?
Gains,
in the 20. It was just because he was a pastor, and his followers across the country voted
for him. Yeah. And even people who sympathize with his faith.
Yes,
definitely.
exactly.
And are
exactly.
not in the other side.
Exactly.
Definitely want
exactly.
to.
What would help Dr. Bawumia is if he's able to get a marketable Southern running mate.
Running mate,
Yeah.
Who is as vibrant as himself.
If you look at NPP in entirety, who comes to mind? I mean, you don't have that person, right? Because I'm not sure Alan would ever want to be
a running mate.
a running mate to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia.
But I'm sure it would have been Adwoa Safo, but because of the issues they've had.
What makes you think Adwoa Safo?
I'm going to predict.
Okay.
If Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia wins this primaries, he's most likely to pick the health minister. Is it health? What's his name? Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempe.
Okay.
His health, right?
Now he's mines and mines and energy or something.
Okay.
He used to be health.
He used to be education.
Now he used to be education.
Yes, he used to be education.
Now he's health.
Yeah, I think his health.
Oh, okay.
His health now.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Maybe
let me
you
just
can
check
confirm.
It. Yes.
He's most likely to select him. You know why? Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempe is a royal. He can become an Asante Hene.
Really?
In the events that it becomes vacant. Yes. He's such a strong,
Wow.
a royal in the Ashanti Kingdom. And so I believe that if Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia wins, in order that they are able to maintain that, relationship with the Ashantis and maintain it as their stronghold, you most likely pick Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempe. We even heard some time back.
Yeah, I think it's Minister of Energy.
Energy.
And Petroleum, right.
Yeah. So we heard that, he was going to contest their primaries, but somehow he didn't come. Now ask yourself why.
Yeah. These people, they can do mass.
Wow. So I'm sure he's done his calculations and his. But as to whether he's a marketable candidate and would hold the same credentials as Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and the NDC's running mate to be naming, that's another thing. Right, because he also has his flaws. He was at the education sector when we had all this mess up in the education system. So that also is still hanging on him.
Wow.
So that's what I think would happen. But ultimately, John Dramani Mahama would have an edge over
Dr. Bawumia. Heading to the
just
election, main
he's
election.
a Christian.
Okay.
And our Christian population is well over 60%.
You think the religious card is going to play that big of a role?
Two things play a role: tribal and religion. So if tribal is not playing a role, religion will definitely play a role.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you see, His Excellency, the former president, having an edge.
Yeah.
In the elections.
When it comes to these tribal and religious, these two factors, so that's what I'm narrowing down to.
The statistics. That's why I mentioned Adjo Safo would have been the best person because of her father's.
So you can also predict. You can also.
I'm also predicting. but I don't know what the relationship is now. But I think there's a bitter.
There's no way Adjo Safo can be named a vice presidential
running
because of the bitterness in this.
Because
but if
the parties of most people in the party, not officially as a party, but most people in the party believe that she wasn't there when they needed her.
Right. So if it wasn't for that, that's what I'm saying.
She was even, playing silo, doing silo with them. Sometimes when she's not needed really, but when she's around, when it becomes very critical for her to be there to vote, then she goes missing.
The bigger conversation is the fact that let's just say that we even have the advantage of having two of our own from the north leading the charge in the 2024 election, being the main candidates for the two main political parties in this country. The bigger conversation then is that should, in case, as you said earlier, former President, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama wins, what is it going to make of the North or the Northerners? Because there are a lot of complaints that, he had come and a lot of people didn't see a lot of effort in making the North bridge the gap between the North and the South.
Yeah.
Is it going to be a different, government or a different, also knowing the fact that this is going to be his last, term as president? Do you think that is going to make him do something different? Because as we keep saying, the North continues to be, one of the places that it's so much, focus is not put. What are you looking at as somebody who sits on the fence and sees things from afar?
Yeah, I think that, in fact, the North will be the biggest beneficiary if Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and John Dramani Mahama are the major runners in our elections. Not because they come from here, but because of the kind of development projects that will be embarked on here. Going into the elections, the NPP would feel that they will need to do something significant to solidify their base in the northern region and in northern Ghana in general. And I'm sure that is why they've started a lot of these projects already. You can talk about the road projects. You can talk about, the factories. So they are putting up, and even these 1V1D, I mean, one village, one dam. Yeah, 1V1D project was geared towards, it was a long shot. The projection was that before the NPP ends, they should have captured the north.
The north, yeah. With something.
Yes. And that's why they started with these projects. The success rate is another issue, but of course they started. But what would happen, like we saw in Kumewu and we are seeing in Asin North.
Yeah.
The ruling government seem to believe that when you give the people what they want towards an election, they are most likely to vote for you. And that's why they are using, they are embarking on a lot of development projects in these areas we are having by-elections. I'm foreseeing that in the general elections, they are likely to do so. And their focus will be in northern Ghana because, NPP usually wins elections with just two regions. You know that? The Ashanti region and the Eastern region.
The Eastern region, sorry.
And they try to make some impact in the swing regions, Greater Accra, Central region, the Bono regions. But largely, they win elections with, I think the 2016 elections or so, the NDC won in 8 regions. In terms of popular votes, they won in 8 regions. But NPP won in 2 regions, the Ashanti region, and still won the general elections. So their focus will be on the north. How or what are we going to do to get more people from this part of the country to support us? Once Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia wins the primaries, he's going to have an absolute control over the NPP, right? And in having absolute control of it, he has to have absolute control of where he's coming from. And so that will be the biggest target for them, to capture the north entirely, not leave even a single region. We have 5 regions. They wouldn't want to leave a single region, so they will push a lot of projects here. On his part, John Dramani Mahama, if he wins too, would want to leave a legacy.
Yeah.
What should my people remember me for? Yeah.
Especially that he has had this backlash.
Yes. In my first term, I was told I didn't do enough for my people. So what else should I do so that people will be satisfied? That's where he too would push a lot of projects into these parts of the country. And so I think ultimately we are going to be the biggest beneficiaries.
And deservedly so.
No matter. And even if Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia also wins, he would want to do more in the north to capture it in absolute terms. So, yeah, I think we'll be the biggest.
Do you think there is any likelihood for the 8 to be broken? Because
difficult question. It's a very difficult question.
But you have to answer.
Because with all the dynamics you've mentioned, coming to play.
Yeah.
Do you think there is that likelihood?
It's a difficult question because this is the first time we are having a number of dynamics going to determine, the elections. The dynamics are changing, and these dynamics are the ones going to determine.
And they've not happened before.
The election, and we have not seen it before. So, I usually like to go through history, what happened in the past, and then use it to project what will happen in the future. But here's the case: we don't have such reference points. But I think that it will be difficult for the NPP to break the 8. It will be difficult because, when a party is in power, it loses a lot of support. People are dissatisfied. People feel neglected. When I say people, party people themselves. People feel they worked so hard for the party to come into power, but when it came, they had nothing. And so that kind of work, they may come out and vote all right, but that kind of work they put in to bring the party into power, they will not put in same efforts again. They will relax. They will say, okay, we went into the bushes campaigning, but the party came, we got nothing. So the best I'll do is to go and vote for it, and that's it, right? So that kind of edge, that kind of euphoria will not be there within the NPP. So it will be very difficult for them to come all out and be able to break the 8.
Because let's not forget, President Mahama too is also another personality.
Yes.
Another,
very powerful
personality. Yes.
And, he has already, he doesn't need to, I believe that President Mahama doesn't really need to campaign much.
And you see, one thing I also realize about him is, how vigorous he campaigns.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just during their primaries.
I mean,
he never
knew
slept.
It was a done deal for him, but he was all
over the place.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of people feel, him as a person and feeling part of,
the cause.
The cause that he's, and he's also one of the people who is very good at, galvanizing people to get to understand his, to understand that the policies he's making are for them.
So when I said he doesn't really have to campaign, he just needs to identify the loopholes in the NPP's, government and then pounce on it.
Just as you said, incumbency always have that. People are always fed up of you and all that. Especially when you go all the 8 years.
Yes. When it is the first 4 years.
People will give you the benefit of the doubt.
Believe that, look, it takes at least 1 year to set up your government, right? So you have technically 2 years to work, because the 4th year you are busy campaigning
for
again.
Another election,
right? So people usually think that the first 4 years is not enough for anybody.
So at 8 years, if you haven't done
John Mahama
anything
didn't
extraordinary,
lose 2016 because he was doing very bad. He lost because his party has stayed in power
for
long, right? From 2008 to 2016, people thought that they had enough time to change Ghana, but they didn't, and so they needed to make way for us to try another person. And so that 8 thing is really, really going to be difficult unless the NPP, NPP is a very smart political party. I always say this, even on my radio program. They are very smart. They know how to use power. They know how to, turn things in their favor.
Talk,
Whoever thought NPP would win 2020 elections. But in the last 3 months before the general elections, they pumped a lot of cash into the system. Right? There were people who did this Ayaluna thing. I knew a lot of people who didn't even apply.
And they got it.
Right? That kind of resources they pushed helped them. I don't know if this time they will be able to do that, obviously because of where we are as a country, where we have our senior prefect IMF now supervising us
with a kid.
So we may not have that luxury to spend that much, but I'm pretty sure. I've heard their communicators. In fact, some of them have even said it on my program that they'll use everything possible to break the 8th. Everything possible could mean using the police, using the military, using the courts, right? Because if you look, and that is not to say our judicial system is not independent, right? But if you look at our Supreme Court, for instance, more than 70% of the judges now were appointed under this very government. So if indeed the party wants to use everything possible to break the 8th, they may consider using the Supreme Court, right? Or the police, or the military, or any of our major stakeholders.
But do you think that is exactly what they mean when they say that? Because it could be probably making sure that they...
when you push them to the wall, they usually tell you that anything legally possible. Right? And I always say that this, our democracy, I mean, rule of law, is just about people's interpretations of, the laws, right? That's why even in the Supreme Court, the judges interpret the laws differently. So it's about who says what this means, right? So something may appear illegal, but when you have someone who can defend you,
it might go through as legal.
It might go through as legal,
Wow.
And so when they say they'll use everything legally possible, it can be anything. I mean, it can't be anything.
Wow.
But I think it will be a defining moment for our democracy again, because a lot of people are watching to see how this government will go about organizing the 2024 elections. Not just people locally, but even the international community
as well
are watching what is going on. The president was already accused of using mafia tactics to kick out the Electoral Commission boss and appointing,
Jean
Mensa. Even recently, a known NPP communicator was appointed
as election
as one of the deputies, right? When they say they'll use everything legally possible, it can mean
anything.
So we are waiting to see. But I honestly think that it will be difficult because of the voter apathy thing I spoke about. And they'll be the biggest losers, really.
Wow.
Because people are unhappy because of the way the country is being managed, right? And so if people are not going to come out and vote, they are most likely to be your supporters who will not come out and vote. Because the opposition guys, are hungry for power. Everyone wants
their person to come up.
Their person to come up. And so they will come all out to support their candidate to win. But you, the incumbent, is likely not to have
your people coming
out to vote. So if you check election trends, most voter apathy,
usually affects
the incumbents. And so I think that it will be really difficult for them to break it. But anything is possible. They can't break it.
Do you think the last election they did anything? They used everything possible to win it? Because there were a lot of allegations against them using the voters' ID, changing it, and doing a whole lot of things around that too.
It depends on what you mean by anything.
So I'm asking you, as the technical person, who had the chance to interview the first gentleman, you've seen it all. So please tell us.
To be honest, if we are going to consider what we saw what we heard in the media,
Right.
You are likely to believe that they tried using or they used everything possible.
Legally or illegally.
Because legally
Right.
possible. Because you look at what happened prior to the elections, the ousting of the EC boss, the voter register thing, the Ghana card, the guarantor thing, all those things. Then to the day of the election where people were shot and killed, to where we had to go to the Supreme Court and all those things, right? And that's where I don't want to mention it, that term for judges of the Supreme Court came up, because people thought that they were just trying to push a certain agenda, and trying to get a certain candidate become the president at all costs. So it depends on what is everything possible. If that is it, I think that was really
it's been an amazing conversation. I think in the lead up to the elections, we would have a more extensive conversation about elections.
And when I'm coming, I'll wear helmet.
Before you catch stray bullets. and also one of the reasons why we didn't actually have a conversation about the NDC primaries was because we all knew it was a done deal for JM, so there was no need talking about it and all of that. But in the lead up to the 2024 elections, we are going to have a conversation about the elections itself and what we see as young people and all of that. My guys, thanks so much for coming through.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yunus is a radio show host, morning show host at Justice FM, right? What time is your show?
From 8 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Every weekday?
Every weekday.
Okay, so you can catch him on Radio Justice at that time to, have more insight. One of the best journalists in the North.
Yeah.
I should tell you. Snapped #1 photographer in the
myself,
whole of the North.
usual suspects.
I always see him on your podcast. It's good to meet him finally.
Yes.
I'm always here.
It's exciting to have all of you on the podcast today. Thanks so much for coming, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Super excited about the insights and what we discussed today. And thanks for watching today's podcast. Make sure you subscribe, like, and make sure you share the video to your own, social media platforms. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode. We out.